It's very nice to be here. It's my 5th time at ng-conf, but first time as a speaker here. So I'm very excited about this moment. And I'm going to be talking about setting up enterprise front-end for success. So it'll be a little bit less Angular related, but more of a development processes on the front end. So who am I? Just quick thing. I'm a principal architect at Cisco. I'm part of the Indirects team, which we have most of our members here actually. Angular GDE, and I also organize Angular Toronto. So I want to talk about setting up the front end for success. But first, I'd like to tell a little story. Some of you know me as, well, Indirects guy from Canada. But what some of you don't know is I actually grew up and was born in a beautiful country of Ukraine. And yeah, thank you. And I grew up in the second biggest city in Ukraine, 2 million people, right there, Kharkiv. One of the unique things about Kharkiv, it's fairly close to our neighbor right there. So again, this is where I grew up, this is where I graduated, and in fact, last year we were planning a 20-year graduation anniversary with our class. We were very friendly, over 28 people, everybody talking, very excited in January, talking about discussing our plans to get together and things like that. And then on February 24th, 2022, the war starts. Barely a week later, my friends sent me this picture. This is my school. It didn't end there. It didn't end there. 2 months later, in June actually, it looks like this already. So why am I telling you this? I wanted to thank a lot of you, US and other countries, for big support. In fact, if not support from US, Ukraine probably wouldn't even exist right now. So again, thank you for your support and your support from the US government. Thank you so much. It means a lot to people in Ukraine. Thank you. All right, so now back to our original topic, front-end success and how to set it up. First, we want to define what is the objective? What we are trying to do with this front-end success? What does it mean? What are we trying to get with our front-end engineering groups, teams that are building things together? For that, we need to define the objectives. And for example, with our front-end group, we want to deploy and release our products frequently. We want them to be deployed with simple, well-understood processes. We want the code to be of a high quality, right? We want it to be scalable and maintainable. We want it to be well-designed and well-reviewed. So this is how we define the success in our groups. So how do we do this? How do we do this? I'd argue that the only way to really achieve this is to have engineering ownership of the code and actually the entire code experience. It's not only about implementing a feature and just throwing over the wall somewhere else for it to go. Like a good homeowner, we should care about the entire feature end to end. We should care about the code. We should care about the quality of that code. We should care about user experience. And of course, how it actually lands in production for our users to experience as well. So I think these are very much defining things for engineering ownership. And this is what we're striving for within our front-end group. And how to get there, how to get to these objectives, how to get to this code ownership things. I'd argue that it's based on 3 things, 3 pillars: peoples, tools, and processes. And what we've defined with our group is a number of steps to get to the desired outcome. And these steps are team communication, monorepo, feature flags, trunk-based development, code styling, automation, testing, and planning. These are the steps that I'll briefly touch on. Each one could be its own talk in ng-conf. Maybe next year I'll have the whole track, no? But I'll just briefly touch on all of them just to give you a better picture of what's it about. So we'll start with the team communication, and I think I'd argue that this is one of the most important things. Especially with the larger teams, especially with the teams now being distributed, working remotely, it's super critical to have a number of channels of communication for the entire front-end teams. Especially, again, for example, our teams are distributed all over the world, starting from India and Europe and North America. It's super critical to have a way to communicate to each other and not be in silos. For that, typically, we would try to have a common channel for communication where anybody can ask anybody questions. But what's also very important is to have a special channel for critical updates. No noise there, critical updates. This is especially important if you're trying to change how the processes work, update folks, invite for discussions. Those are very important. This is a very important channel, right? Otherwise, you can't even change anything else, right? Because you cannot be able to communicate. People should be able to hear you. So that's one little touch on people. I'm not going to go more into people because there's more there, but let's focus now on some of the tools that can help you to get to your success. The step number 2 is a monorepo. For us, it was very important to organize the code together because we have multiple products that want to try to share separate things as well. Some features that are shared, some common components that are shared. It's very important for us to actually get it all together so that it's streamlined and we have a better way to enforce better practices along all the code base. It also improves our build and test processes through caching, makes it faster, and things of that nature. In fact, when somebody else says, okay, but now you have a monolith. It's not a monolith, right? So if you want to deploy your product front end, it builds what it needs, takes libraries that it needs, builds it together, and deploys. When you want to deploy your cart front end, for example, it would do the same thing. It'll pick and choose what it needs, build it together, and release. So your releases of products are not tied together. Only the code base is shared at the same place. And this is, again, big enabler. And in fact, some of the things like common components are no longer need to be separately released in the npm library, versioned, and trying to figure all that out. It's all built at the same time. Again, critical step. And again, we chose ng to be our monorepo. I'm sure you've heard of it. If not, there's a booth right there. All right, so next one is feature flags. What's a feature flag? Feature flag is basically an enabler for us to introduce new features or code changes without having separate branches. Basically, we do it as almost as if condition, well, it is basically if and condition in the code directly, right? So we have a current flow, and we want to introduce a new feature. We hide it behind basically a if, introduce new behavior, and then later launch it and remove the old behavior. There are a few types of feature flags. There are build time feature flags, basically things you put in your environment TS, but that means that you need to rebuild the app if you want to change the value. Or there are runtime feature flags. And again, there are multiple third-party providers for that. We're using, for example, Split.io. There's Launch Darkly. You can even use Firebase remote config. There's many ways to do it. And that's a really huge thing. I really like the runtime changes because it allows me to decouple my deployments, the code getting to production, and then feature enablement. So we would deploy the code to production, verify that it all works fine. If all works fine, then we enable a feature. If the feature, if the enablement went bad, you can always disable it instead of trying to do the hot fixes and spend nights and weekends trying to fix it, or even do rollbacks, which sometimes even not possible at all. So big enabler, big enabler. It also allows to unblock teams. For example, if team A is still working on the thing, it's not ready, you still want to deploy the code, but that code might be not working yet. It's just hidden behind feature flag. So then the next deployment happens, only then they can enable their flag. Again, it's a super critical piece of, I think, software engineering, especially on the front end. One more thing that enables is a trunk-based development. So that's basically our step number 4, trunk-based development. Before we get there, I want to talk about 2 concepts: complicated and complex. For me, they're not the same thing. For me, complicated means messy, hard to understand, many things involved, convoluted. Complex, on the other hand, it's still a bigger system, but it should be based on a basic, simple rules. For example, like you see the birds flying together, they don't have a meeting before that just to say, okay, how you fly, you first, you go second, you go right. They don't do that, right? They follow basic, simple rules. The stronger birds start the formation, and then other birds start forming on the left, on the right, because that reduces their drag. So they follow simple rules. Once the leading bird gets tired, it gets pulled back and rests a little bit with less drag behind other birds. So they operate on this basic, simple rules, but yet together they form a complex system. So I much prefer complex versus complicated, and I'm sure you do too. In fact, Leonardo da Vinci said, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And I very much agree with this. In any process that we have, we try to simplify them as much as possible. All right, so what does it have to do with trunk-based development? Well, there are multiple branching strategies that we use in our development. For example, Git flow or GitHub flow are very popular strategies that involve multiple long-living branches and PRs being merged to certain things, certain steps. But I'd argue it's very complicated. Isn't this better when you have a single line, single branch? We call them main. It's our trunk-based development. And those yellow dots are just small PRs, very short-lived, or short-lived branches even, that are getting merged back into the main as soon as possible. And again, remember the feature flags? Again, they're a huge enabler for this. That allows us to have that branching in the code without having branches. So what does it do for us? It saves time merging. It simplifies developer processes. And in fact, the bugs go sooner because you can now deploy main with bug fixes. They go way sooner versus they are in some random branches. Big enabler for development. So we talked about team communication, monorepo, trunk-based development, and feature flags. I'm going to go a little bit more into processes right now. And this will be the step number 5, which is code style. One of the studies said that best performing teams have one specific trait that they share, all of them. And that's the shared understanding of excellence. I find this very important in any development. And one of the ways we can have this shared understanding is through style guides. We want to specify set expectations for both PR author and PR reviewer what the good looks like. Which rules do we want to follow when PR is being reviewed, for example? One of those is TypeScript style guide. And we use tsdev/style guide for this. So when we see something in the code, we can always refer to this, hey, this rule does this and this. Can you please adjust this? Right? So TypeScript style guide. The other one is the Angular style guide. It's actually published in Angular.io. So we frequently refer to that as well. Testing guide, again, very important. How to write unit tests, how to write larger tests. Very important. And again, some other best practices. Those style guides, those help, first of all, again, make it clear what the good looks like. Secondly, help share the knowledge between teams and keep code base as a whole maintainable as well. A big thing. Now, you'd ask, okay, good, but if I don't want to be every time pointing things, say this should be this way, should be this way, how can it be done? Well, that's number 6, step number 6, automation. Automation tools that can help you enforce some of those best practices or in general help you with the pipelines. For example, tools like auto-formatter, right, pre-year. We shouldn't be arguing, should it be a space, shouldn't it be a space? It should be just happening, and tools should be enforcing that, not formatting it ahead of time. ESLint rules. You can have, there's a lot of Angular ESLint rules. There are other ESLint rules as well. You can write your own custom list rules to enforce the rules that you come up with as a team. Strict TypeScript. And again, I can't enforce this one more. TypeScript is your friend. It helps catches things at compile time, not at runtime with your users. Please use strict as much as possible. And other ones are some of the PR pipeline tools. So that's tools. Next step is, I talked about engineering doing the implementation, right? So now let's expand this ownership, right? Let's expand it a little bit more. Let's talk about testing. Testing is, again, a very important phase, and I would argue that it's developers' responsibility to have high-quality tests. This is not your QA's group responsibility to ensure the quality of your code. How can somebody else be responsible for the quality of the code that you write? QA teams should be safety net. If something does slip through, they're your help, they're catching you. But they should not be the ones responsible for the quality. So testing is a big part of the engineering ownership, and again, one of the steps to get there. There are multiple types of tests, and again, I think all of them should be written by a developer who's working on the feature. Unit tests, integration tests, visual tests, and some of the higher level acceptance tests as well. So those all should be done by a developer. These help developer first validate that the feature actually works as it should. It helps with the documentation of the code. It helps to make sure that any future refactorings won't actually break your feature and things like that. And again, there's a whole talk on testing I've done before. You can find it in YouTube and things like that. All right, so that's testing. That's implementation testing. Now let's look at the other side, planning. If we don't do planning, strange things happen. Planning is a critical part of being a software engineer. The way we do things, for example, we have a design review process, design docs, and they're not UX designs. Those design docs are actually the ones that outline how your feature would be working. You're making a proposal, and then you're sharing it with a wider team for review before you actually implement your code. Why is it helpful? First of all, it helps you to organize your thoughts. Make sure that all the APIs that you need are there, and things of that nature. It would also help you to propose what your component tree structure would look like, what your state flows would be, and overall, what's the overall design, how you approach this. So another thing is that document would be helping everybody else sharing your knowledge, right? So they'll look at it and they'll understand how it's better implemented. And the other thing is, and probably one of the important things, is getting early feedback. Because doing a design changes, code design architectural changes during PR time, I'd argue is way too late. And now you've wasted so much time getting the PR into good shape, getting those unit tests, and now you have to redo all of that. So I think it's super critical for teams to be adopting design document and design document review process. In our group, we do it weekly, so anybody can submit, anybody is welcome to attend within the front-end engineering teams and provide their feedback. So set for review and then design review meetings. All of these steps help us get to another ultimate goal, I think, is step number 9, is daily releases. Because you have to have all those things figured out and going right, the quality, the planning, the automation tools, the style guide, all of those things, feature flags, to enable daily releases. Daily releases is a huge enabler, and once you experience it in any of the companies or with any of the product, It's very hard to go back to like monthly, quarterly releases. Again, huge enabler. It allows you to roll back faster, smaller diff codes getting in. If your feature, the discussion of the release becomes almost irrelevant because the deployments happen every day. And now you're allowed to focus on your specific feature with a product manager. Where exactly you do want to release? Because it doesn't matter, because the code gets there daily. Huge enabler. And again, once you experience it, it's very hard to go back. All right, so 3 pillars: people, tools, and processes. These are the steps that I think that in the order that you should implement them if you have them. It's very interesting to hear from you where are you on this journey. But again, team communication, monorepo, feature flags, trunk-based development, code style, automation, testing, planning, and finally, daily releases. All right, one more thing I wanted to show. Again, I'm from the ng-conf team, and ng-conf team recently launched a very interesting thing. It's called enterprise support. We've heard from many of the companies that they're trying to, running into some of the issues when ng-conf trying to find better practices and things like that. So we basically wanted to enable them to come to us for the support, to do the architecture review, some of the workshops and trainings as well. So if you go to the ng-conf.io, you find this tab there. You can contact us at the bottom and reach out to ng-conf team who can provide some support. Woo. All that, yay, woo. One final thing is there are Discords. I'm sure you've heard of Angular Discord already. There's a lot of chat going on with the ng-conf on that Discord. It has over 30,000 members. Join one, Discord GG Angular. There's also one for ng-conf, Discord GG ng-conf, so see you there. On that, thank you. You can find me on Twitter at Okrushko. Thanks again.